Hello, everybody. We are here with Ella Morton, the director of a film that will be screened at our festival this year. It's called The Great Kind Mystery. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to this interview, Ella.
Thank you.
So I will ask you some questions about your film. Okay, so just a little introduction about your film. This film is a very personal and intimate film, I felt, where the voiceover speaks in a sort of stream of consciousness, recalling anecdotes, reporting feelings and thoughts, and listing words in the Mi'kmaq language. Their translation. So when I first saw your film, I felt there was a very deep personal need behind this film, behind the making of this film. And I wanted to ask you at first, how did you come to realize this film?
Yeah, sure. Well, all my films are about the land and the landscape and our connection to the land, and also like our relationship with mystery and the unknown, and how the land is a threshold where we confront mystery. So I actually met Amy, the narrator, kind of by chance. I was working on my first film, Kajanaktuk, which is about Nunavut in the Canadian Arctic. And I was looking for an Inuk woman, like the Inuit who live in the Arctic here in Canada. I was looking for an Inuk woman who could narrate that. And Amy is part Inuk, but her ancestry is from Labrador, which is just to the northwest of Newfoundland in eastern Canada. So not quite the same. Nunavut is further north. But a friend of mine knew Amy and said, "Oh, I know an Inuk woman." So I started talking to Amy, and she said, "Yeah, I've never actually been to Nunavut, but I have lots of stories from Newfoundland." She ended up putting me in touch with another woman, Naulak, who was the narrator for Kajanaktuk, my first film. But then as I was talking more to Amy, I just got really excited about everything she had to talk about. And I was also at the time, I had been to Newfoundland a couple times by then, and really, really love it there. And yeah, even though it's not quite in the Arctic, there's something really special about that place. I find, just in terms of the landscape, it's kind of a transitionary place between like the landscape of southern Canada, which is more like forests and everything, and then the Arctic, like tundra and no trees. And when you're in Newfoundland, you can see how like some places look like southern Canada and some places look like the Arctic, and just the shape of the land and the rocks and everything, you can really tell it's this transitionary space. And so that's part of what I'm so interested in about Newfoundland. So the Great Kind Mystery sort of branched out into its own project over time. I did first interview with Amy in 2019, where that made up a lot of the narration. And then I had plans to go to Newfoundland to shoot the film in April of 2020, but then of course we all know what happened around then, so it got delayed a couple more years. But I guess only in 2021 I went to Newfoundland and shot the film, and then also did another interview with Amy to kind of fill in some of the gaps in the narration. And then put it all together, and here it is. So that's sort of how it came to be. But I think the delay actually from COVID worked in its favor. It gave me more time to think about it, and just kind of narrowed it in a nice way. to be even more what it could be. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. It's very interesting to know all this backstage somehow of the process of this film. You talked about nature and how much you were somehow you felt strongly for this kind of nature, and we can really see it from this film. It's what I really like was the fact that it's this film. I felt it's both very personal and intimate, and you can really listen to little anecdotes of the life of someone, but in the same time it has also this breadth to more universal level, somehow dimension, and this link is really made by the presence of nature, I felt. So I think let's go to the core, to what I feel it's the core of this film. When the voice talks about the great kind mystery and her relationship with this landscape, with this nature, I felt really there is this connection between the concept of home that she lived personally and individually, but then a wider concept of home that everybody can feel somehow. So maybe I can ask you a little bit to talk to us about this topic.
About home, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I guess Amy actually, she grew up in large part in Ottawa, so in Ontario in Canada. But yeah, like her early years she spent in Daniels Harbour in Newfoundland, where a lot of the film is captured. And then of course she went back in summers and everything. And so I think for her, that place, it's really kind of represents her roots and her early childhood memories and kind of formative memories, even though she's not there sort of full time anymore. So yeah, and I really loved kind of the specificity with which she talked about it. It was my first, my previous two films that I made were I more loosely paired up visuals with what the narrator would say, but with Amy is that there was so much that she said about, well, we walked down this path and then we went into these woods and there was this cabin and this garden. And so yeah, I really thought about that a lot when I was there shooting it, to really get like specific visuals to what she said. And even how, she talks about going to Lansum Meadows, which is a bit further north from where she lives in Daniels Harbour, and just how like the subtle differences in the landscape when you drive. It's like a 3 or so hour drive north, and how just she can feel a difference in the energy, and it feels, she loves it, but it doesn't feel like home there. But Daniels Harbour definitely feels like home. And when I was, I went to all these places too when I was there, and I could feel the difference too, even though I'm not from that place. So I think I really appreciated her perceptiveness and just sort of her awareness of this whole region of like Western Newfoundland, and and her generosity and the specificity of how she spoke about it. I don't know if that answers your question, or
actually, this what you said just made me think about a specific moment that I remember when she was talking about a cabin, like a purple cabin that was built by her grandfather. If I remember correct, And yeah, now that you are telling me how this film was made, I mean, the fact that you recorded the voice in a certain moment, and then there were years passing between the recording and you going to film. Actually, it's strange because somehow I have to say that I felt this distance, but in a very good way, like in a way in which the image paired with the voice, I felt it was not just how to say, it was not feeling just didascalic, like, okay, I'm talking about this and I'm showing the exact image, but it was more like as if it was an image from a dream or from a memory. Like maybe it's also because of the analog aspect of your film, but maybe now I'm thinking maybe it's also because this distance that there was between the moment of recording and the moment of filming, and also the fact that the voice is someone of a person and the person who's filming is another one. So it's like I don't know, I could feel this this connection between the voice and the image, but also this distance. And I like very much this feeling of distance that you can feel.
Yeah, I think that works well that works with my intention.
Yeah, because it seems like in between this in this distance, it's like you have a space where many things can be, like it's not just as I said, it's not just a direct connection, it's like there is a space in between. It's interesting. And my question was also about this, I felt this theme of home is really, what's interesting is that it's not just she starts from her personal experience, but then it's like she comes to really to talk about home for human beings somehow. Because when she starts to talk about her relationship with the nature, I felt really it's like bringing this concept of home, this feeling of home to another level, to another dimension. That was also interesting because it opens up somehow the whole film and the whole discourse. And
I mean, I think I relate to that a lot. And like for me, so much of my work is about even beyond this film is about exploring unfamiliar places. Like I'm not from Newfoundland. I was born and raised in Vancouver on the opposite end of the country. And I haven't lived in Vancouver for 10 years now. I'm in Toronto now, and I've lived in different places, and I love traveling to many places. And so I think a lot about my own relationship to home, and I feel like my own relationship to home is kind of malleable, or like there's various places that I've been to more than once that kind of feel like home, even though I'm not from there. And and I think too a lot, like you're saying, about like home as not a physical place, but a spiritual kind of state of being. And so I suppose like whenever I'm making films and choosing narrators, like just in terms of ethics, I do want to make sure I'm finding someone who's from that place and is really familiar with that place to speak about the place. So, I think that's better than me speaking about a place that I'm less familiar with. But but at the same time, like I have my own, like I myself am definitely drawn to Newfoundland, and I've been there 4 times now, and done a few other projects there. So in a way, Newfoundland does kind of feel like home for me. And there's so many like cultural things about Newfoundland that I relate to a lot. And so yeah, and then I just love, like, even since completing the film, I just very often think about that concept of the great kind mystery, and I love how she described it, and just how it's like an alternative term for God or the creator, and it's not anthropomorphizing this entity, whatever it is. It's just a mystery. And I love that it's just a mystery, which is true. Like, nobody really knows why we're here or how any of this came to be. And but then I also love like that it's the great kind mystery, that I love the idea that there's this inherent kindness to the universe. And I've thought about that so much, and that's something that that I wouldn't have thought of, that I didn't have in my own kind of context of what a mystery is or what the universe is until Amy brought it up. And I think it relates as well to like in the first interview I did with her, and when, like, in the scene where they're going into Western Brook Pond, that big fjord, and she's talking about her relationship with nature, and that she could go out into nature and she could die there, but nature would still take care of her even if she's dead, because nature would make her body a part of it. And that the idea that is kindness and is care, even though you're dead. And I love that. And like I've read like a lot of literature, like Canadian literature written by like white settler Canadians about like the settler relationship to nature in Canada. And I brought this up in the first conversation I had with Amy, that there was this sense of like nature being so powerful and kind of frightening, but frightening in an exciting and a like exuberant and alive kind of way. But just like the immensity and the power of nature. And Amy's response was like, yes, I see what you're saying. I get that, but I think there's also a kindness about nature. And yeah, and I think that's more like with other Indigenous folks who I've spoken to, that is kind of a thread that in the Indigenous idea about nature, that yes, it's powerful, yes, it can kill you if it wants to, but that doesn't make it scary, or that doesn't mean it's against you. It still has a kindness that it wants to give to you. So yeah, that was really enlightening for me to hear her articulate that. And yeah, and I suppose that kind of relates back to the idea of home, that if the universe and if nature has this kindness for us, then home can be anywhere, I suppose. Yeah.
I felt the same. I was also very touched by this word kind that was there, because it was very interesting for me as well. And I felt also she's talking about her childhood, mostly, like, because it's the place where she spent her childhood. And in the same time, when in the end she was talking about nature and how you feel when you are in such landscapes, that you feel so small and so somehow insignificant. I felt as if that is also somehow childhood, like when you, even a grown-up man or grown-up woman, in front of that landscape and of that power of nature, of the mountains, feels like a child in the end. So it's like also reconnection to childhood, I felt. It's also interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And another thing I noticed is this theme of the disappearance that she's talks about both of the landscape, especially like when she, for example, when she tells about the butt rock, that is a special rock that she was remembering from her childhood that got broken, and she and also other places that towards through the years they changed, and some pieces of land disappeared. So this disappearance is very present, and also I felt somehow this sense of disappearing also when she lists all those words in the Mi'kmaq language. I felt as if she was trying to fix them somehow, because otherwise you can forget them. I don't know, that was my feeling, because it's a language that I don't know, and I guess few people in the world speak that language. So there is a danger of disappearance also in that case. So what I wanted to ask you, how did you felt towards this, and towards this loss?
Right.
This theme of something disappearing.
Yeah. Well, full disclosure, like Amy is not fluent in Mi'kmaw herself. We got the words from an app that she uses. There's a Mi'kmaw app that's got a bunch of words on it, and the translations, I guess that deromanticizes it a little bit, but I don't believe anyone in her family is fluent in Mi'kmaw anymore. She just has an interest in it, of course, from her heritage. So yeah, I think, of course, I'm sure there's some people out there who are still fluent in it, because someone made this app and everything. But I think there are very few, which is the case with many Indigenous languages in Canada. But what else was I going to say about it? A lot of what she said was kind of unexpected to me, or I suppose, I mean, the things she said about her town and how people have moved out, all the young people have left, and the erosion, that like the streets and homes were falling into the ocean. Like those things are all, like, we hear those things about many small towns and kind of the changes over generations. But I think the other thing that really came as a surprise to me was her story of how she lost her status, like her Indigenous status. And I since learned more about how common that is. But in Canada, like it's different from one province to the other, but like it's kind of become a complicated thing where like if you have Indigenous status, like you get a card, and then that gives you certain benefits from the government, and and for instance, you can get scholarships, or there's various advantages to having your Indigenous status. But it's become complicated as the years go by, because there are so many people who have mixed heritage, and so where do you draw the line of who's Indigenous and who's not? But then, of course, as you can imagine, the government has not done the greatest job of administrating all that. And so, as Amy said in the film, even though she's definitely, like, she's Indigenous on both sides of her family and grew up with this, within this identity, she was Indigenous before it was cool to be Indigenous, basically, because of like these arbitrary rules that Newfoundland made, and how she grew up partially in Ottawa. Like they changed around the rules of who would get status, and then there were too many people, so they changed the rules again. And it was something like, if you didn't live in Newfoundland between like 2005 2005 to 2007 or something stupid like that, then you lost your status. So it ended up being that there's like people who are maybe have one distant Indigenous ancestor but they happen to live in Newfoundland during those years, so they got their status. And then other people like Amy who have much more Indigenous heritage and really grew up in that culture, but they happen to not live in the right place at the right time, so they lost their status. And with Amy, it was really unfortunate because she was going to school at the time and she had a scholarship for Indigenous people, and she lost the scholarship. And but beyond that, it's like who is the government to tell you what your identity is? That after all these, of course, we have a long legacy in Canada of awful things happening to Indigenous people. So after all that, now this is going on. So that was a surprise to me when I did the interview. But since then, I've talked to other Indigenous folks, and I had a student who I was teaching a few years back from Manitoba, and same thing happened to him. And then, other people have told me, yeah, this is actually really common. And so, yeah, it's something that I think more people ought to know about. It just, it's just kind of a very sort of modern iteration of colonialism. And and so that I didn't expect to include that in the film, but once she told me the story, I wanted to, because I felt it was important, and also an important component of this whole theme of loss and and just time marching forward and things falling away that you can't get back. And
Yeah, definitely. I remember I noted this sentence because I found it beautiful and interesting when she said that, identity is pretty much being connected to the land in the way the government in the way the government wants, and not in the way it actually is. And you hear her talking about all these little details of the landscape, and you understand that she's so connected to that place and to that her origins. But identity is being connected in the way the governments decide to be. So it's I liked the way she talks about it. And I found somehow that the fact of filming can also be a way of trying to fight this disappearance somehow. I felt like
absolutely.
The fact that you wanted to fix in images all these places that she was talking about is also was creating this contrast somehow between what she was saying and the fact that with the images you try to save something somehow of this story.
I'm saving it, or I'm just trying to bring awareness, or just sharing, just through sharing a story with other people, you're saving it, and you're giving it more power and more significance. So I hope that's the case.
You're right. Okay, so the last question I wanted to ask you is more about your art and your projects. This is the second film the second of your films that we are screening in our festival. And I saw, for what I've seen so far, you are working very much in analog. And I wanted to ask you what you are working on at the moment, and if you are in new projects, or how you are developing your art at the moment.
Well, I work within both film and photography or visual art. I make photographs as well, and I manipulate them in similar ways that I do to the film. So I'm working in both of those all the time. But yeah, in terms of film, I do have two other projects that I'm working on right now. My next film is almost finished, should be completed in the fall, and then I'll be sending it out to festivals. But that film is called Crushed Between Ocean and Sky. And it's a bit longer. It's like 25 minutes. It's and a little more complex than my previous films. I've got multiple narrators in it, but it's about a journey that I took a couple of years ago on a tall ship that sails to Antarctica. It's a little more personal. I did this trip after my mother passed away in 2020, kind of as a way of just like trying to celebrate life again after losing my mother. And but some unexpected things ended up happening on the ship. So we were on our way to Antarctica, and we ended up in this big storm, and the ship got struck by lightning.
Oh.
And then so nobody got hurt, but the ship had to divert. We couldn't complete the whole trip on that ship. So I ended up, the lightning was just too strange and crazy of a thing to not include in my film. So that film, it kind of centers around that event. And I have different crew and passengers on the ship who are kind of collectively telling this story of this lightning strike. And then it sort of goes into other stories about kind of about life and death and adventure and being out on the ocean, in the middle of the ocean, and yeah, and just kind of being lost, or why we go out to these faraway places. And then yeah, there's some sea shanty music that I was really lucky to get that's part of it. And it ends with some footage from Antarctica. I was able to go to Antarctica on a different ship afterwards. But yeah, that's just sort of there at the end as a dreamscape kind of. So yeah, it's a little different than my kind of more basic documentary formula that I've had in my previous films, but I'm excited to get it done and share it with everyone. And then my film after that I'm still doing the post-production on, it doesn't have a title yet, but it's about the connection between Greenland and Newfoundland through the icebergs that there's. So every spring in Newfoundland, there's icebergs that float past the like northeast coast of Newfoundland, and they come from Greenland, from a glacier there. So yeah, so I've got stories from both places, from Greenland and from Newfoundland, about the icebergs. And it's, yeah, kind of connecting these two places that don't really have any connection other than these icebergs. Yeah, so I'm working on that. It'll be finished next year at some point. So yeah, those are my film projects that are coming up.
Great. Thank you. That's interesting. And I hope we will be able to watch them at a certain moment in the festival.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was nice to talk to you. I just wanted to remember to the ones who will watch this interview before the screening of your film, that your film will be screened on Monday the 3rd. So if you want to come, you are welcome to watch Ella's film. It's very beautiful. And yeah, I hope it will inspire many other artists that we have here. And yeah, Ella, thanks for your time. It was very nice to get to know you finally after having watched 2 of your films.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
And yeah, I wish you all the best for your next projects, and hope to talk to you in other times after new films.
Yeah, me too. Sounds good.
Great. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.